Hi class, and welcome to your next video on evolution. So we've already discussed the 4 pillars of evolution, and in class we're going to discuss a little bit more about natural selection and how natural selection is going to select in a certain environment. And so now we're going to discuss a little bit more about how we evolve. So we're going to talk about those factors influencing evolution. So we have 5 factors that influence evolution. We have natural selection, a big one again, sexual selection, mutations, genetic drift, and gene flow. So the first thing you need to know is what allele frequency is, because it's going to come up a lot. Allele frequency is the number of times an allele shows up in a population. So we've talked about alleles with genetics, and mom donates one and dad donates one. Well, now we're going to look at how many people in a population or how many organisms in the population have a certain allele. And is it becoming more and more frequent or less and less frequent, or is it just kind of staying steady? And we're going to look at how natural selection, sexual selection, mutations, genetic drift, and gene flow can all affect this allele frequency. So the first thing is natural selection. Darwin's theory, which has the 4 pillars, some individuals are more fit than others for an environment and therefore survive and reproduce at a higher rate. So remember we talked about the fittest survive. Well, in order to be fit in an environment, you have to have those advantageous traits. And in order to evolve through natural selection, you have to be able to reproduce. So advantageous alleles become more frequent. And remember, advantage was one of those 4 pillars. So if you have an advantageous allele, you're going to be more likely to survive in that environment, and you're going to be more likely to pass it on to your offspring. So examples of environmental pressures include food supply, predators, parasites, or disease. So a lot of times we talk about predators because we talk about blending in to our environment. And so we talk about the advantage of camouflaging ourselves. The next one is sexual selection. And so as long as mating is not random, sexual selection can play a role in evolution. So certain individuals would be attracted to other individuals because of particular traits. This would result in individuals with that trait to reproduce at a higher rate. So specific traits are preferred, and preferred alleles become more frequent. So what that basically means is if, let's say, a guy likes a girl with blue eyes, okay? Let's say the whole population likes girls with blue eyes. Well, girls with blue eyes are going to be the ones who get married and then reproduce. And when those are going to be the ones who reproduce, there's going to be a higher allelic frequency of blue eyes. And so blue eyes are going to occur more and more and more often because we have that higher allelic frequency of those blue eyes. So these traits may not necessarily make them fit for the environment because, for an example, the bright colors is not the best for hiding from predators, but they help attract mates, which is what they're sexually selected for. So it's not necessarily going through with natural selection what's going to make them fit, but it's going to be what is going to pass on those traits so we can evolve. So the next one is mutations. Sometimes when eggs and sperm are formed in meiosis, mistakes are made. These are mutations. Sometimes these mistakes can result in new alleles. Now, we've talked about mutations before in DNA. Mutations are not always a bad thing. Sometimes we can get new characteristics, and these new characteristics can be advantageous to our survival. And so that's just another one of those 4 pillars of natural selection helping that organism survive. So for example, perhaps a mistake in DNA is made and the new DNA ends up coding for slightly longer legs. That introduces the new variation into a population that might perhaps be an advantage that would be passed down to offspring. This would really be an advantage because that new organism might be able to run faster. And it might now be able to outrun its predator. So now it lives longer and it can pass its traits on to its offspring. The next one is genetic drift. This only occurs when populations are small. And the population changes due to a random chance. So what happens is when the populations change due to a random chance, some alleles become more frequent simply by chance. So what happens is part of our actual population is leaving or going somewhere. Changes in the genetics, in this case, we see the bottleneck effect, where we get more of one allele and less of another. And we're changing the whole makeup of our particular population here. With gene flow, it's when individuals with different genes find their way into a population, so they're coming into a population now. And this involves the movement of individuals from one population to another. So we're seeing some immigration, we're seeing some immigration. And imagine a population of green geckos live in the forest, and perhaps a yellow gecko wanders into the population and mates with the green gecko. That could produce more yellow geckos, and natural selection could happen there. So gene flow is when we have some immigration, and genetic drift is where we have a small population and some major event makes it so that that population gets even smaller and we cut out some of those alleles. Okay, species and speciation. A species is a group of organisms that are able to interbreed and produce fertile offspring, and speciation is the creation of a whole new species. When two populations that were the same species have developed so that they no longer interbreed, they are considered a different species, and this is speciation. So this occurs through evolution, when maybe we had the same species and somehow they got separated and they adapted to a new environment, and since they kept adapting to different environments over time, and this is a long time, this isn't just a year or 2 years, this is hundreds and hundreds of years, they become new species due to the mutations, due to genetic drift, due to all those different changes in their allelic frequency. So how do we have speciation? Well, the first way is through reproductive isolation. This must occur in some form so that two populations of the species cannot mate. So what I was explaining there, where you might have two totally separate environments, maybe for some reason a couple of the population get isolated on an island and they can't get back. So there's another way with behavioral changes, when birds of the same species begin singing different songs so they don't know that they're the same species. Or we obviously have the geographic isolation. So when we look at this, we look at species relationships, and we can see where we have some of the same, where we evolved from each other. So if we look at what is called a cladogram, and we're going to learn a little bit more about how we look at these cladograms. We start up here with the bird, and we come down, and we see the crocodile comes off of the bird. And the crocodile and the bird are very closely related. But then we come down here and we see, oh, there's this trait of eggs with shells. And eggs with shells says that everything down this way is going to have, or everything up this way is going to have eggs with shells. Well, crocodiles and birds must have eggs with shells. We come down here, and then we have hair. And both of these, primates and rodents and rabbits, must have hair. We keep following it, and it gives us some of the traits, and it also gives us some of the other characteristics based on the cladogram. And we're going to work a little bit more on this in class, but we're going to talk more about these allelic frequencies and how they change and how this is changing our environment. So make sure you took great notes. We're going to talk about these cladograms a little more in class, and we're going to do some activities with them as well.